But based on the Hungarian picture, we are in Hungary. You represent the National Bank of Hungary. As far as you can, and I already know there's a problem with that question, as far as you can, what are your predictions for this year for GDP, inflation, and the all-important euro-HUF exchange rate?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. Yeah, I promise I will talk about the numbers, but you mentioned several forecasts regarding the Hungarian economy. I think one key conclusion from this forecast is that the uncertainty regarding the future is pretty large nowadays. I think if you would like to read well the current environment, it's not enough to talk only about the war. Of course, that's the number one topic nowadays. So there's a number one question in the media, in the speeches about the forecasts, and so on and so on. But I think if you would like to read well the current macro environment, we have to talk more about the megatrends which are nowadays shaping the world economy. So let me mention just one number. So the average economic growth in the world economy in this decade was 2.6%. In the previous decade, it was 3.9%. And the average growth of the world economy since the Second World War was also near to 4%. So it's clear that something has changed in this decade in the world economy, and it's a general issue, not only in the European economy. Of course, we are in a severe situation, but we can see very similar numbers, for example, in Asia. So the average growth in China since the Second World War was more than 8%, and now the forecasts says the growth performance of the Chinese economy can be 4.5%. So it's very clear that something has changed relative to the previous decades. And I want to mention four factors behind of this phenomenon. These are the 4 Ds: demography, debt, disruptive technologies, and the deglobalization. Why it's worth to mention these factors? The demographic trend started to deteriorate in many countries. I think that's the first time in the human history where the labor supply become a constraint in many economy, starting from Japan, in China. We know many examples here in Europe. So it's clear that the demographic trends started to play against the real economy. So what does it mean at the end of the day? It means a very tough competition for the skilled labor. It will generate upward pressure on wage formation. In the region in Central Eastern Europe, I think the government realized it very well. We need a wage convergence. We need a fast wage convergence towards the Western European economies. The second factor is the high debt level. In the last 50 years, the debt to GDP ratio everywhere increased, and especially increased very sharply during the crisis area. So that was the situation in this decade during the COVID-19 crisis. So what does it mean? If you have a high GDP, debt to GDP level, in many cases more than 100%, in case of Japan, 250, in China near 100, in many cases here in Europe, more than 100%, also in the US, more than 100%. So what does it mean? It's hard to refinance the high debt if the interest rate environment is near to zero, or in some cases in the negative territory, as we saw in the past decade. But now it's not the case. So nowadays the interest rates increased to the positive territory, and it increased to a higher level. And it seems to me that this higher interest rate level can be a permanent phenomenon. The third factor is dimension deglobalization. I don't want to talk too much about the trade war, about the tariffs, but it's clear that the direction of hyper-globalization we had in the last 40 years has changed. And we have to prepare for an environment where we will have more constraints in the global trade. Why it is an important factor? Because nowadays the world economy is much more interconnected than in the previous decades. And I strongly believe these three forces, the demography, the globalization, and the debt issuance, one of the key factors in the last 4 decades behind the strong economic growth performance, relatively strong economic growth performance, lower and lower volatility in inflation. I think the globalization and those positive trends we saw in the labor supply was a big factor behind of that, and the declining path in the interest rates. So it was a very important driver behind of this phenomenon. So why this problem? If these trends start to change into the other direction, because it will generate higher volatility in inflation, it will generate weaker economic growth, and at the end of the day, it will generate higher financing costs for the state, and of course, at the end of the day, higher financing costs for the private sector. If I look at the global picture nowadays, I think we are moving in that direction. And in this point, I wanna switch to the numbers. Of course, I don't want to miss the point in your question. So regarding the Hungarian economy, we have to know we are a very open economy, both in trade and also in the financial markets. On the one hand, if I want to talk about the real economic growth, you mentioned that there are some forecasters who said the real economic growth in Hungary can be 1.8%. The government said the economic growth can be 3.4% in this year. I think it's worth to differentiate between the internal and external forces. In the internal field, if I look at the domestic demand and the key drivers behind the domestic demand, I can say the Hungarian economy is in a pretty good position. The labor market remained pretty stable. The employment ratio remained at a high level. The real wages are increasing fastly. And I strongly believe that these developments will remain with us in the coming years. And in the last couple of years, we saw very high savings ratio in case of the households. So during and after the COVID-19 crisis, the savings ratio of the Hungarian households jumped to a high level. In the last couple of quarters, this savings motif started to ease. So the domestic savings ratio started to shrink a little bit. So I think it will also support the domestic consumption in the coming quarter. So all in all, I strongly believe that the domestic consumption can grow by 4 to 5% in this year. We have a good chance for that. One very important factor behind of that is still to control the inflation at a lower level. So I think that's one of the key conclusions from the last couple of years. If the inflation remained a part of our life, on that case, it's much harder to grow in a faster way. One big question is the investment. Of course, there are many uncertainties nowadays on the table. So in my reading, that's why the investment numbers in Hungary remained pretty poor in the last years, because the firms remained in a wait-and-see position. They said, okay, there are many uncertainties in my market. Looking ahead, it's hard to assess that it's a transitory or permanent factor. So that's why they remained in a wait-and-see position. There are a lot of liquidity in the non-financial corporation balance sheets nowadays. They have a lot of money. to deliver needed investment. So on that point where the uncertainties regarding the future start to disappear, I expect a fast rebound in the investment of the domestic force. Of course, till that point, the key driver of the investments remained the severally mentioned FDI into the country. So that's the story in the internal part of the economy. So I'm very optimistic regarding the domestic demand drivers. Of course, if I look at the external environment, there are only question marks. Question marks we can say. Of course, the largest question mark is the future in the German economy. It's pretty clear that the German economy nowadays start to decouple in many fields. They start to decouple from the cheap Russian energy on the one hand. They start to decouple from the fast-growing Chinese markets on the other hand, and it's a very bumpy road for the German economy. It's pretty clear. So that's why it's hard to assess the near-term outlook of the Hungarian export, because it's very strongly linked to the German performance. In midterm, I'm more optimistic, so I still strongly believe that the Hungarian economy is a very attractive market for the FDI in the region. So that's why I strongly believe that the new capacities which were built up in the country in the last couple of years will support the export performance in the economy in midterm. So all in all, in the real GDP growth, our forecast is closer to the upper end of the mentioned band. So in the latest inflation report, we said the economic growth in Hungary can be somewhere between 2.5 to 3% range. So closer to the more optimistic side of the forecasters.
Thank you very much, Barnabas, for that very thorough answer. Rezső, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Absolutely agree with Barnabas on the consumption. So I think it's still there and also driven by the house modernization subsidies. Families can again acquire. So it's a good news hopefully good news for the construction sector, because they are suffering, and a pretty modest good news for the retail sector at all, because the retail sector is also not in the best condition currently. However, I think in a long term we cannot. So a long-term growth can be based on consumption only, and due to the very open economy, as Barnabas also mentioned, that Hungary is the second most open economy in the European Union after Ireland, which is a special case. We are really dependent on the markets, and of course the world economic market is as turbulent as never. And of course Germany, we are dependent on Germany, but Germany is dependent on the world economy, US, China, Russia, and everyone. So we need to see it in a more global context, and that is really uncertain, as Barnabas also mentioned. I think the third immediate impact is the agriculture, which is can always add or add something on the GDP growth. And the last year, so 24th agriculture production or agriculture year was very weak. So not as weak as 22, but still weak. So if the weather conditions will be reasonable this summer, this could add something to the GDP as it does in 2023. However, if we are thinking long term, and we are thinking long term in Hungary, we see that the gap between the top three in the Central Eastern European region, like Estonia, Czech Republic, and Slovenia, and between the rest of the modest GDP per capita ratio countries is growing, and this is worrying. So this means that the long-term significant GDP growth per capita is only possible in Hungary, in my opinion, with some structural changes in the economy itself. Because we are like on 100% employment, as Barnabás said. So people cannot work. More people cannot work because demography is not supporting this. People can be more productive, of course, but of course this can be supported by technology. But this is not enough. So we need to think in a long term how the structure of the Hungarian economy could be changed and how this could be supported by the government, by the National Bank, of course, but it's mainly by the government, how the sectors who are currently producing significantly more GDP per capita than the average economy could be supported more. And the recent changes, of course, we are in an election year, or almost in an election year, but in an election period. The recent changes of the taxes and the immigration rules do not support those sectors who are basically generating like twice as much GDP per capita as the average Hungarian economy produce. So it's really important that those are considered. Also the middle sector, so the small and middle-sized enterprises, I really welcome the new Demian Sándor program, which is I think a phenomenal idea. However, we are in discussions with the Minister of National Economy that the success is not there, but they expect it, because somehow in Hungary from the very old Soviet times, cooperation is something which was forced, and people are somehow afraid of. But if small and middle-sized enterprises cannot cooperate with itself and cannot achieve a critical size for technology investments, because alone in an island a technology investment is not sustainable. It's not you cannot finance it, and this to achieve, I think, needs to be a complete rethinking of those subsidies. And I really welcome the aim that technology investments became like main focus for and not only workforce creation is the only factor, but this I think a more coordinated support is unaffordable.
Of course, we don't have many SMEs in the room, but we have an awful lot of companies that rely on SMEs, and every economy is reliant on SMEs. Perhaps we can dig into some of that a little later on, but there's one area where I think we cannot ignore, and we have to talk about it, even if it's only to push it to one side and say there is no answer that we can realistically give at this stage. But President Trump, it seems to me, is the living embodiment of what then Secretary of State Donald Rumsfeld once called known unknowns. We know that he doesn't have much time, that Trump, not Rumsfeld, doesn't have much time for the European Union as an economic entity. He certainly doesn't have any time for China and the Chinese economic model. We know that he's already threatened tariffs to pretty much everybody. And then sometimes those tariff threats disappear, and then maybe they come back again. We know that the Prime Minister of Hungary, Prime Minister Orbán, and Trump are on extremely friendly terms. But we also know that Hungary's economy, as you've both already elucidated, is so closely linked to Germany that without German health, there is no Hungarian economic health. And increasingly, our FDI is Chinese in the EV market, in the battery market. So it seems to me that we're not putting ourselves. We are in a position where there are threats all around. So how concerned should we be about the Trump effect on Europe and therefore on Hungary, or is it just an unanswerable question and we have to buckle up and enjoy the ride? We'll start with you, Rezső. Endure the ride, probably, rather than enjoy.
How much time do we have? So I think it's like a discussion we can continue until the evening. So US has to be the origo, basically, of the predictable, stable, rule-based world order always, and this changed. So it's basically the English expression is quite rude, but I think it's called madman theory. which is like the unexpected unexpectable, which is like started like a war. So if you have been negotiating with tough parties in your career, I think this is elevated to the foreign politics, and this is if it's done by the world largest economy and who has, by the way, the largest army, is not a comfortable position, and he is using it like this America First initiative, which is, I can understand from their point of view. If you are negotiating for your country, you are negotiating with all the power, and of course in this situation when China already started this few years ago with the same measures, it was not. I think it was not a surprise. The intensity is rather surprising, I have to say, and you can feel that the whole thing, it doesn't make sense, but it did. And we will see how this will impact the third economic order in the situation when US has quite a defined agenda they would like to achieve. They would like to grow the internal market. They would like to sell the energy, which is currently, with the closed Russian energy pipes, it's a unique situation for them, and it's like a really valuable negotiation power for them. So currently, 50% of the Western European energy is acquired from the US in LNG, from the LNG part, and LNG is now playing a crucial role as you. This is basically the only delivery method. It's still in place. So how this whole game will end is definitely not a zero-based game anymore. So it's and Europe in this, so between China and US, who are really organized, really agile, fast decision making, really aggressive way of thinking about things and how they are implementing it. The current structure of Europe is really dangerous. So it's like the current weekend. So something happened in a minute, and Europe needs to call for a all-country conference to somehow agree on the next steps. And once they agreed, 2 other steps already have been done by the US. So staying competitive in this market will be extremely difficult. And coming back to Hungary, so Hungary is like as open as it always was, and Germany is only the immediate party who we are basically producing, delivering, serving, but Germany is in the same situation as well. Is one of the largest exporter for the US, and if this stops, so the whole logistic supply chain and everything needs to be rebuilt if Germany is moving towards the production in the United States, as they did already in the chemical industry, in the heavy industry. So if you are considering the Ruhrgebiet type of companies, they are already in the US and producing in the US, using the cheap energy prices, using the in the market of US. So it's extremely difficult. And coming back to Hungary, yes, Orban and Trump looks good together, but Hungary is in a EU country, so you cannot implement special rules for Hungary. The rules, all the rules will be implemented for the European Union. If we are talking about tariffs, about special trade negotiations, they will come through Hungary. Hungary can be supported by investments. They are talking about direct US investments to Hungary. I think the Ministry of National Economy already set up a special task force for that, which can be important. But investments, it's really important. Coming back to the first question. So if US can invest in a more value-added type of industry services, this could be really beneficial for the Hungarian economy, but this is still absolutely uncertain.
And I fear that that's always going to be what we come back to. We are certain about uncertainty. Barnabás, anything to add?
I want to add 2 points. One point to the tariff story, and the other one is to the German situation. So regarding the tariffs, so for me it's still a big question mark. So what are the aims behind the tariffs? In the bank, with my colleagues, we made an estimation. So if all of the tariffs till now was mentioned by Mr. Trump will be introduced in the coming months, on that case, the average tariffs on the U.S. export and import will increase to that level we saw last time after the Second World War in 1950. But during that time, the trade intensity of the world economy was pretty low. It was near 4%. So the world trade in share of the world GDP, it was only 4%. So nowadays, this number is near 25%. So it's pretty clear that we are living in a very interconnected world. So within this environment, introducing tariffs, I think it's pretty hard and unpredictable. So that's why I absolutely agree with Rezső that it's not a zero-sum game. A lot of non-intended consequences can materialize in the coming years. So that's why I still strongly believe that the whole tariff story is a part of a negotiation process between the big players. And then at the end of the day, the aim is to rebalance the global imbalances we have nowadays in the trade. The second comment to the German situation, I have to say that I'm not an expert in the car industry, so that's the big player in the house. I'm an economist, but I really like the economic history. And my fear is that nowadays the situation of German car industry is pretty similar to that one we saw in the 90s in case of Italy in the light industry. And 20 years ago in case of Finland, the so-called Nokia story. So that's my fear. The German car producers missed the point and missed the direction of innovation. So nowadays the cars are not only the hardware; they are mainly software, and that's the future. And it seems to me that the other big players in the world economy, like the Asian players, can produce car in a more cost-efficient way than nowadays the German players. And I think that's the big issue. So not only the energy price, I think the scale efficiency, the cost efficiency is much higher nowadays in Asia than in Western Europe. So what does it mean for Hungary? I think the Western European car producers will remain interested to improve their cost efficiency in the looking ahead. And to do that, I still strongly believe the Central Eastern European region, and especially Hungary, can be a good platform to do that. So one example, in the last 5 or 6 years, more than 10% of the Hungarian GDP came to the country as a new FDI into the battery industry. These investments were mainly driven by new players from Asia, from South Korea, from China. Other more than 4% came to the country as a new FDI from the car producers, mainly from Western European, from German car producers to the country. So I think it's a good signal that Hungary can provide a good platform for Asian and Western European investors to meet and to produce cars for the future in a more cost-efficient and scale-efficient way. I know well that nowadays the cyclical pattern of the car industry is moving into downward. I think it's also partially linked to the demographic changes everywhere. So of course, the demographic changes will result a change in the cycle in the car production. So till now, that was the normal. We bought a new car in every 3 or 4 years. But looking ahead, I can imagine that due to the demographic changes, it can change. So I think it can be another factor why the car industry is in a cyclical downturn. But again, in midterm, I think Hungary can remain an attractive place to produce cars in Europe.
While you were saying that, that's an important point, and maybe that's an element of hope for us to grasp to. I remembered, there are many phrases in English that are not particularly polite, but I remembered that the madman approach to politics was actually first attributed to Nixon, and that ended well. So we'll see how that goes. Perhaps there's an area where there might be some better news. Trump has promised to bring peace, or at least to end the fighting in Ukraine. Although I have to say, the opening gambits appeared to be a bit odd in that they appeared to give away or concede to Russia everything that Russia would have wanted. Ukraine won't get its land back. Ukraine can't join NATO. That may be realistic statements, but that's not surely how you negotiate. Anyway, that's a different matter. Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, importantly, Peter Szijjártó, has said in the past, on several occasions, that EU sanctions against Russia have cost Hungary 19 billion euros. So it's a serious amount of money. Perhaps because I'm a cynical old journalist, whenever I hear a number like that, I immediately wonder, is that true? So perhaps we could dig into that. But is that really the result of these sanctions, the impact on Hungary, the sanctions against Russia? The most important thing that would ever come out of peace, of course, is that people stop dying, whether they're civilians or soldiers, whether they're Ukrainians or Russians. But is there the possibility of an economic peace dividend, we think, from the end of the war for Hungary? Rezső?
Of course. So it's a hard, really hard topic, I have to say. I have weekly calls with my Ukrainian KPMG CEO, and this is just worrying what is going on there. So it's sometimes we are doing it from shelter, sometimes doing it from the office. So you cannot imagine. And those missile attacks are basically daily normality now. So this needs to stop. I'm completely agree. How the economic impact will look like, of course there will be certain positive effects for Hungary. That's not a question at all. So first of all, the safety of the country will increase, which is important for foreign investments as well. So I think it's already considered as a moderate risk, but still. So if you are considering from the US whether you put like in Nyíregyháza a new factory, it's still near to the war. So I think it's still a decision-making factor. So that's definitely a positive development. Of course, the energy, we don't know, but how the peace will look like. So the energy situation and like the supply chain and energy safety of the country will definitely be higher, which I think it's a really important factor that we quite painfully understood how painful it could be to depend on like a one player supplying situation or one supply chain. So I think it's changed for forever, but it's still, I think that the more opportunities you have to purchase something, the more the competition could be used for pricing. So it's definitely positive. So that's what I think is positive. In the rebuild of Ukraine, how Hungary can contribute, or how the European Union will contribute, I'm less optimistic, honestly. So if you see the current developments, you can see these differences I already mentioned in the behavior or in the policy of US and the European Union. So if you like followed the last developments on the rare earth elements discussion relating Ukraine, so UK, as always the most agile economy, already started negotiations with Ukraine that they would like to have access to those resources, and started immediately negotiation in exchange of the future rebuild. Secondly, US already jumped in, all with its power, and then say, okay, no, that's not belongs to the UK. We need a chair at the table as well. Meanwhile, Olaf Scholz, value-based, I have to say he's right, was complaining on how unethical this is, and did nothing for the European Union. So that's currently that the situation, that if the European Union cannot coordinate itself better and stronger and more agile, they will miss this opportunity. How they will contribute to the redevelopment of Ukraine, which will be like a huge investment for the future.
Yeah, if you're in the construction business, that's something that's of interesting. Barnabás, is there anything you'd like to add?
If I remember well, last year one of the largest German research company published a pretty good paper about the costs of a war from a real economic perspective, based on historical data. And one of the key message of the paper, maybe the Kiel Institute did that, and one of the main message of the paper was that the gravity works in a war. So meaning that closer you are to the war, more severe the real economic and financial consequences of the war on your economy. So I think it's pretty clear in our case and in the Central Eastern European case. You mentioned the 19 billion damage on the Hungarian economy. I think it can be a good approach regarding the numbers. So just one story element is the net energy bill in case of Hungary. So before the war, before 2022, the net energy bill of the Hungarian economy were somewhere between 4 to 5 billion euro. In 2022, it jumped to 17 billion euro. In 2023, to 9. In 2024, it was near 7 billion euro. So the difference between the average we saw before the war and the mentioned numbers, it's near to 20 billion euro. So I think, so that's why I'm saying it can be a good approach regarding the damages. So one factor is the higher energy bill on the Hungarian side, and of course both the government and the private players can see the consequences of the higher macro energy bills. And the other factor is the impact on the financial markets. So I strongly believe that in the last couple of years, our region, and maybe especially Hungary, paid a geopolitical risk premium. So we paid higher risk premium for that position we have in the map. So we are pretty close to a war region. So in line with that, the risk of the Hungarian investments increased, and in line with that, we have to pay higher risk premium in all of the segments. So that's why I strongly believe as soon as we get closer and closer to the peace, I think it's worth to look at the situation in the last couple of days. So we don't know details, but we read the rumors. A talk started about the peace, and immediately the regional market started to react in a positive way. So I think it's a very clear signal that we paid a geopolitical risk premium in the last couple of years. So on that point, where the big players will be able to reach the peace in the Russian-Ukrainian war, on that case, I think the risk perception of the Hungarian assets will improve, and it will generate lower yields in all of the segments, both in case of the financing of the government of the budget, and also in case of the private players. So I think that's the other very important segment we have to talk about in the coming months.
As I say, thank you for that, Barnabás. As I said, the single most important thing is that people stop dying. But if there is to be an economic benefit, it would be nice to think that we might benefit from some of that. I'm going to jump ahead slightly because Barnabás has to leave us relatively soon, and I wanted to ask you this before you have to go, although it might be a difficult question. Anyway, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán told the Lamfalussy conference in Budapest on January 27th, in fact, you were there, I'm pretty sure, that the euro was good for strong economies but not for emerging economies. Is he right? And can you see a date? Now, obviously, the answer will be broken down into partly political and partly economic, but can you see a realistic date when Hungary might join the euro?
Okay, so first of all, Hungary is interested in a successful and sustainable euro adoption. So at the end of the day, of course, it will be a need to join to the euro area. Of course, the key question is the timing. And 4 or 5 years ago, we wrote a whole book about the euro adoption and what are the key drivers behind the decision, the pros and cons, and so on and so on. And the key message of the book was pretty similar to the mentioned sentence you read from the Prime Minister. Again, I think it's worth to look at the history. I really believe in history. If you are a middle-income country, so nowadays Hungary is in a middle-income group. In our case, at the end of the day, the key story and the key aim is to continue the fast-growing and catching up story. So that's the strategy for the Hungarian nation in midterm. And the key point and the key question within this path, which the proper point to adopt the euro. And if I look at the history, in many cases, we saw that those countries who were not prepared in real economic terms, so meaning that competitiveness, in their cases, we saw very clear numbers for divergence, not convergence, divergence. It's worth to mention Italy, Greece, also Finland. It's worth to mention Finland. We can mention countries from the region. I don't want to say it's because of the euro, so it's not a good explanation for that. But in many cases, we saw, how to say, signs for that on that point where a country reached the euro adoption. After that, they said, okay, it's enough. I sit back. I'm a very comfortable position. And immediately, the competitiveness of the economy started to deteriorate. And if you have, if the monetary policy is outside of your own scope, on that case, it's much harder to regain the competitiveness in an economy. So that's why the conclusion our side is pretty similar to the mentioned sentence, So one of the key conclusions is not enough to be well prepared in the nominal terms, in inflation, in the yield environment, in debt to GDP ratio, in the fiscal side. These are still crucial points, especially the fiscal policy. We need the proper room for fiscal maneuvers in the future on that point when you are joining to the Eurozone. But the other issue is the competitiveness. So, and of course, there are good examples. I think the good examples are the Baltic states. The Baltic states were able to, so they were well prepared for Euro adoption. And after the Euro adoption, they continued the very strong supply side reforms in the economy, in the field of digitalization, in the field of fiscal policy, and so on and so on. And within the Eurozone, they were able to maintain the convergence path. So these are the good examples. So that's why we are saying we have to put more emphasis on the real side of the economy. We have to put more emphasis on the competitiveness. We have to be in a better prepared position regarding the competitiveness. So I absolutely agree with Rezső. So in the supply side of the economy, there are still many tasks for the policymakers in Hungary. And if we delivered these jobs on that point, I think we will be in a much better position to join to the euro area.
You'll hate this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Can you envisage a time frame for that work to be done? 10 years, 20 years, 5 years?
How to say? I think it's also the Hungarian history. In many cases, we said exact numbers. In 5 years ahead, we will join to the euro area, or in this year, we will join to the euro area. But all of the cases we missed that year. So that's why I don't want to mention only one exact year. I strongly believe the time path will link to the real economic convergence in our case. So if we are able to deliver a faster real economic convergence, on that case we will be ready to join to the euro area in an earlier point.
If everything was going wonderfully well, is 10 years possible?
I think it's a good. It can be a good approximation for that.
Rezső, do you have any thoughts?
You must be a journalist, Robin. So it's
there are rumors.
No way that I can give an answer on that. So, but fully agree on the points of the convergence. So if you are entering the eurozone in the current situation, I absolutely see the risk as well. So, but this is something, and we are mentioning the Baltic states. I think this should be an example how you can do it, because the Czech and the Slovenian examples are different, because the industry base was absolutely different when they started, and of course growing up on the strong base is always, so you can miss it, but they did not. But the Baltic states were different, so they were like on the really different geographical position in the ex-Soviet Union, and they basically made a complete economic change after they got independent. So the euro is a must on a long term. I think that's every party. So I haven't heard anybody who did not agree on that. But the timing is crucial. I fully agree with Barnabás. Hopefully, and this is, I think, somehow a really important joint collaboration task for the policymakers in the National Bank and in the Ministry of Hungarian Economy. So it's something which requires like a really long-term collaborative planning from those policymakers.
We have a couple more minutes of your time. Very good. Then let me ask another specific question to you. and it's equally unfair, but you know that's what I do. When, bearing in mind that you're in place until midway through next year, I think, when and under what circumstances should the MNB re-enter a rate cutting cycle? How many? And I know from our earlier conversation that you were saying the monthly data isn't really important; it's the long-term data. But how many cuts do you think we might be looking at this year? And what might the base rate be by the year's end?
Okay. After in the January rate setting meeting, the Monetary Policy Committee sent very clear signal regarding this question. So nowadays, cutting the rates is not on the table as an option. Why? Because of the inflation. I think we have to know that the inflation environment has changed since last September, not only in Hungary but globally. So if I look at the OECD countries, in case of 2/3 of the OECD countries, we saw that the inflation rates increased again since last September, because the world economy changed again into a more inflationary direction. The food prices started to increase globally, in the global markets. In Europe, the gas prices started to increase again. And of course, we are open economies, so those global developments have a very significant impact on our inflation numbers. And in our case, also the changes in the FX market had a strong influence on our inflation, and it's also mainly linked to the global issues. So since the end of last September, the global investors, one of the number one investor strategy was to put the money into the US markets. So that's the best option. So what does it mean for the emerging markets? So we are flying in a very turbulent environment again, because the money is flowing from the emerging markets to the developed markets again. So it caused a significant depreciation also in case of Hungary and in case of many emerging markets relative to the US dollar. So I think that's the case nowadays. The January inflation data in Hungary was 5.5%. Our inflation target is 3%. So of course, the key number to assess any future steps in the field of monetary policy is still the inflation and the midterm inflation outlook. If we want to see a successful 2025 in the Hungarian economy, I think the key point is to manage again the inflation at a lower territory, near to 3%. So we reached that in 2024 after a very fast disinflation. The average inflation in Hungary was 3.7%. But again, we have to know the global environment turned again into a more inflationary direction. So the key point behind the monetary policy decision nowadays is to provide and to regain the disinflationary trends again in the Hungarian economy. To do that, we need still very patient, very disciplined monetary policy decisions, meaning still positive interest rate environment in the economy. And as I mentioned, now cutting the base rate is not an option. The Monetary Policy Committee sent a very clear message that now maintaining the base rate at the current level is warranted for a sustained period of time. And I think again we are flying in a turbulent environment, so we have to prepare for anything in this environment. So what can be the game changer in that story? Again, the inflation could be a game changer in that story, but nowadays the inflation numbers are moving into a wrong direction. So the key now is to change that direction and to regain the disinflation and to regain the low and stable inflation environment again in the Hungarian economy.
Thank you very much indeed, Barnabás. It's now 9:40, so if you want to exit, please do so.
Will you continue the discussion?
I have a couple more questions I'd like to...
So thank you very much again for the questions, for the attention. It was a pleasure to be here, and all of the best to all of you.
Thank you very much indeed. Barnabás from the MNB. There are a couple of questions I'd like to take up with you, Rezső, if I may. We had the news at the end of last year that Hungary had lost, in inverted commas, some of its EU funding permanently because of the European Commission deeming that not enough of the milestones had been met. Is that money really gone forever? And what's the danger that we might lose more of the funding from the EU?
It's like a sensitive area, and I'm also careful to give like clear answers on that, because very few people knows the full picture. And if you listen to the narrative of the different parties, it's really different. So it's seeing the full picture. Without seeing a full picture, it can be different to say. Currently, we understood that Hungary lost 1 billion euro for permanently, first time ever in the European Union. Which if it can be somehow renegotiated or not, I cannot give you an answer on that. Currently, we understood we lost. 1 billion is a significant amount. It's 5%, almost 5% of the total EU funding for the 7 years period, which is a significant number, and also 1 billion euro for the Hungarian economy is a huge amount. And if we are talking about growth, this amount is missed in the construction industry. This is missed in the subsidies for the economic development. There is a risk for further 1 billion, which is like a further 5% by end of this year, end of this calendar year. Again, the situation is not fully clear for external participants, I have to say. So there are rule of law questions, there are anti-corruption measure questions. So there are 17 points, which I think it's a relative large part of it is still not closed between the EU and Hungary. So it's a difficult topic, and there's also combined policy making, politics, economy. So that's I think I can say about this. So we really hope. So I was not expecting losing it permanently, honestly. So if I were here last year that time, and you had asked the same question, I definitely had answered that no, it's I think all the parties will do everything to negotiate it until the end, because it's not in the interest of either parties, honestly.
Okay, well that's not great news, but as you say, we're on the outside and we can't know the full picture. Last question from me, and then I'll ask the floor if there's any questions from there. From the start of this year, or rather starting this year, large listed corporations must comply with mandatory ESG reporting, and that's obviously a big step. Do you think in time we'll come to see this as a milestone moment, that this is really the taking of a major step towards net zero or fighting climate change or whatever? And are there any other significant, because we know that that's here, that started now, are there any other significant tax or regulatory changes that might be coming our way that we should be aware of?
I think sustainability and ESG is something which definitely something which has. I think there is no option for that for the long term. That's I still believe, and I think it's a fact. How you will get there is another question, and you cannot divide the world economy by continents, because it's on the other hand is a competitiveness question as well. So this is putting the EU under a huge pressure now, because I think Europe absolutely value-based and long-term thinking approach on the ESG and ESG reporting came into a huge pressure now through the Trump administration. So we will see what impact this will have on this. On the other hand, I'm an accountant from background, and I always say if you measure something, you get it done. So therefore, the reporting is unavoidable. And we are interviewing global CEOs like for the 10th years in a row, and their commitment to sustainability ESG was always really high. But in the recent years, they saw the risk of non-compliance with the reporting requirements increasingly significant, which is the fact that saying something about your company and about your ESG strategy is one thing, and if you are getting to measure it and prove it, it's getting difficult, and if you get like an assurance review on that, it's an increased elevated level of difficult. So and this is a process. So now we see, of course, so we interviewed in the recent past a lot of companies on that the current CSRD requirements in the European Union are extremely complex, and this is extremely difficult to comply with, and it's like an enormous effort on reporting. And this is not a Hungarian topic, is an EU-based situation. So now this simplification omnibus package, which is like currently under negotiations, is getting to a relief of the companies, hopefully. So I think we need to be reasonable on that as well, without compromising the long-term goal and ambition. Which will, I think, this new package will definitely reshape the reporting scope and the reporting requirements, which is important. Will rethink about the commitments and also reporting requirements relating to the supply chain, which is the most difficult part of this whole game. The scope 3 supply chain type of reporting, which is like has on the other hand the largest impact, because it's like indirectly taking those companies who are not in the scope with you. It's also important, and also will somehow refine the definition of the sustainability investment definition. But still, I think it's the whole thing is unavoidable. So if you are looking for a long-term investment and free money is still coming into the economy, is still looking for sustainable investments, because on a long term, without sustainability, you cannot gain. So therefore, I think it's still there. So if you are coming from the and sorry that Barnabás is not here anymore, because the National Bank made a huge effort on that. How they were one of the strongest policymakers for the financing and finance industry on that, and through the finance and fiscal sector, of course, the other economic sectors were heavily influenced, because you either complied with certain rules or could not refinance your project. So it was a situation. So I think it's still there. We made a current survey on the Hungarian market. Of course, the top 100 companies complied premature on those. So even last year it was not mandated. It's mandated from this year. The double materiality impact calculation was done by majority of them already. Like 78% of them had already a strategy as an ESG strategy and issued the reporting as an early adopter. So which is like a great number, and I think the Hungarian numbers are in the top amongst the European statistics. But we have to say that this new simplification omnibus regulation is weighted by the market players really much.
And presumably that will mean more work for you.
No, that will decrease our work. So I'm value based. I'm value based on this. So it's of course as an auditor, it's the more reporting requirements are there, the more work is for us. So but we have to be reasonable on that as well.
Of course. Does anyone from the floor have a question for, sadly, only Rezső now, but Rezső will be very happy and able to answer it. Any questions from the floor? We've covered a lot of ground.
There.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to listen
Much
to me
better,
one more
thank you.
time again. So there has been a number of references to expected U.S. investments into Hungary with the change of regime in the U.S. Would you have any views, or even better, any knowledge or facts in what areas and what industries and what type of investments are being negotiated or maybe already in execution phase?
Thank you, Bear. We like facts.
Yeah, no, I definitely have no facts. Maybe we can ask Ákos later on, Mr. President, on that. But I think it's too early. So for me, it's too early to state on that. I think the special task forces are set up. That's a good news. So it's in the national economy. It started consulting. So I think many of the market players are involved in consulting on that, but I cannot say you any concrete facts on that. Maybe Ákos, do you have anything on that to add? You are the president of the AmCham, so it's.
No, look, I mean, what we are seeing obviously is a lot of people that I haven't seen before getting involved in directional trade. But besides task forces, besides having now a new government appointed person for U.S. businesses or increasing incoming FDI, I think it's at a very early stage, or at least what we are seeing. Not sure, Iris, if you have any other comments.
I think there are some, good ways which can be expected, like for example, normalization of the ESTA rules. So if we could get back to the same situation where other European citizens, it would be already a very, very nice step from the part of the US. And of course, the negotiation of the double taxation treaty should start as early as possible. Nevertheless, we know that it will take a lot of time by the time we will agree and by the time it is going to be ratified in both countries, especially in the US.
Absolutely, and it's not really supporting new US investments, of course.
If we get a direct flight between New York and Budapest, again, I will be the happiest person.
There were news about this.
We'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
We'll put the word out. Any other questions?
Thank you. Slightly different question, but still on the investments and the trade. There was a good discussion about the tariffs and potentially what it will mean in rebalancing the investments, and also the potential opportunity for the Central Europe as I would say Western European US players are looking for the efficiency. We heard about the car producers as one example. Would you have other areas that you can mention? And my special interest is, of course, financial industry and business services, because this is a high value-added area. Thank you.
And I think the other thing about that is that tariffs don't apply to services anyway, which is what the British are hoping will spare them from some pain.
Yeah, so I think tariffs is always a high motivation for investing on the location. We can see it with China, basically EU tariffs on Chinese electric cars like speeded up BYD production and investment in Hungary, and many more are coming. If you have it's of course a question you can see with Volkswagen in India, as I remember. So what is the definition of a semi-manufactured car, and what is the spare parts? So it could be like an interpretation issue for the longer term. But of course, this is absolutely from China now. But if you see, so we still don't see a clear picture about the U.S. tariffs. I have to say it's too early. So they threatened, I would say, with 25% on Mexico and Canada, and withdraw it in the last minute. You can do it once or twice, but definitely not for the third time. So we will see what's happening on the long term. But there were calculations that this 25% on Canada and Mexico has $25 billion impact on the German economy, because Germany is exporting like a lot to those countries, and of course in this case the export. So they are exporting spare parts, manufacturing in Mexico, exporting it to the US. It's a huge impact for them. So it's like a more complex global game. For financial services and GBS industry, I made a reference in the very first point, and we had discussions with many players in the recent past that the recent changes, both in the immigration rules and the tax laws made, and it was really recent, so really last minute made, had a huge, of course, non-competitive impact on these industries, which I think the different stakeholders are already started to negotiate with the different ministries, because it's of course not fully controlled by the Ministry of National Economy. But if this task force is something which is like catalyzing the brain and the brainstorming within the different market players, I'm already very happy, because consultation between the government and the industry is always a sensitive topic. And if in this case I see, at least in the current stage, an increased interest in the consultations, and of course it's both parties' interest to get like immediate successes, because elections are coming. So I'm cautiously optimistic on that.
We'll take cautiously optimistic. I think I can take one more question if there is one. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Alfonso Dastis. I'm the Spanish ambassador. I have, if I may, a couple of slightly provocative questions. The first one is, you said that one of the weaknesses of the EU vis-à-vis China or the United States is the lack of speed or efficiency in the decision making. Wouldn't you think that maybe an answer is some kind of United States of Europe, some kind of federal Europe? The second question is regarding one of the challenges that the Deputy Governor mentioned before, demography. Again, wouldn't be some kind of solution a relaxation of the immigration policy? I will tell you that in Spain, our economy now is booming, and a big part of that is thanks to the immigration. Surely we have, a source of immigration that is easy coming from Latin America, but we are now 49 million people, and economy is booming thanks to, of course, regular and legal immigration. Couldn't Hungary do something like that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So
let me preface your answer by saying that thank you again for a provocative question. Rezső obviously does not speak for the government in anything that he may be saying.
Absolutely no, and I the first question is definitely above my pay grade. but I think there are many ways of leading a federalistic type of association. Even KPMG is a federalistic type of company structure, but we can react quite on time if it's required. So there are many levels you can empower some of your organs in a way that they can react on behalf of you, even without being like a federal United States of Europe. So that's about the first case. The second, and I really admire the Spanish economy. My brother lives in Sevilla, by the way, so I have quite a direct impression on the Spanish economy. But absolutely, I think we already talked about this, that the strengthening the immigration rules does not really has a positive impact on the high added value sectors either. So this is like a highly political question in Hungary. Unfortunately, that's what I can say you. And 1 year before the elections, it's even more political. So I have to say, so economic interest and political interest are not always going in the same direction in this field. Yeah, that's maybe an answer I can give you.
It's a shocking revelation. In that case, let me very quickly sum up. But first of all, thank you, Rezső, and thank you for staying on after we lost Barnabás. After Barnabás had to leave us.
We haven't lost him.
We can find him. I think there are a couple of very obvious takeaways. The overarching theme is that uncertainty is with us, and we are uncertain how long that uncertainty will be with us, and it is uncertain when it may go. So we're all pretty much uncertain. There were some glimmers of hope and perhaps even certainty along there. Barnabás saying that he's happier about the state of the domestic economy than the global one, although there are question marks around that. The fact that and I'm quite pleased of this, I eventually managed to pin him down to saying we might have the euro within 10 years if everything goes right. But then again, we might not. Something Rezső said very early on, that we shouldn't really be surprised by the Trump approach. He was elected on an America First campaign, but perhaps what is surprising is the intensity of which it's coming. And I know that the Americans have been talking a lot, or at least Trump's people have been talking a lot about, and it's a phrase that comes from Branham, I think, flooding the zone, just getting so much information out there that perhaps people can't follow everything, and you can get through what you want while they're looking at something else, like, I don't know, Greenland, perhaps. And this was really interesting, that maybe Europe needs to look at a better structure for how it operates. Not necessarily a United States of Europe. We are not promoting that. KPMG is not promoting that. Although KPMG is an example of a federalist organization. But that something needs to be done to make Europe more agile than it currently is. In a sense, we've covered a lot of ground. Well, we have actually covered a lot of ground. There is no doubt about that. It seems that so much of it is caveated by, well, yes, but then again, that's economics and politics, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, but. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Rezső as he stayed even longer with us. Thank you for your attention.